and welcome to the Way of the Illuminated Warrior Global Summit Series. My name is Waska, also known as Perry Finkelstein, and it's really my pleasure to be hosting this series of mindful experts who have the intention of sharing with you their wisdom, their stories, and just their ways of being that I know is going to help you to heal and to grow into your full potential. So today, I have a very special guest. Her name is Tami Brunk. And Tami has a MS and a BA, that's a Master of Science and a Bachelor of Arts degree in shamanic, and she is a shamanic astrologer. I speak off the cuff much better than I do reading, so bear with me, people. So she's a shamanic astrologer, the former president of the Shamanic Astrology Mystery School, an active dream teacher, and I know she's worked with Robert Moss, who's an awesome mentor, I'm sure. We'll talk about that as well. The co-founder of Venus Alchemy with Kaylin Castell. She has served thousands globally through Venus Alchemy and her Sky Apprentice program, as well as her Astrology for Earth Renewal online magazine. Tami serves through speaking and writing engagements, personal readings, online courses, and in-person initiatory retreats across the globe. And Tami's perspective is informed by 2 decades of service to the earth through community organizing, environmental writing, allyship with indigenous communities, and her work as a naturalist across the United States. She also helped to found a permaculture farm in the West Bank of Palestine and Israel. Her life passion is to connect and amplify the powers of the New Earth Dreamers, all those in service to a new culture aligned with Gaia and the next 7 generations, through the visionary and initiatory tools of shamanic astrology and active dreaming. So, I got through it. So, it's nice to have you on the show, Tami. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. Yes, I did it.
You did it.
Yeah. So it's awesome to have you here. And the way that that I know you for the audience is that I've been getting your newsletter, your astrology newsletter for quite a while now. And I find like incredible value in it and all the things that you put in there with astrology, but not just that, all the things that you share about your personal life and your mission and your vision and all. And I really respect what you're doing and I'm grateful to have you on the team of light workers that's really making a difference in the world. Yeah.
Feeling really grateful and honored to be here with you, Waska.
Yeah. Well, thank you, my dear. Thank you. So let's just start off because we're going deep today. We are going deep and we're going to offer some healing for the dudes out there. And, you know, my work is focused on the guys, but it really is. It's, you know, these conversations are so good for everyone to hear. So I will be referring to the guys because that's the work that I do. And you and I have shared some stories already, how you are connecting the sacred feminine, the divine masculine, and how that's all integrating. So see, I'm getting all worked up and excited already. So all right, calm down. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the astrology work that you do, how you got into that, how you found yourself on that path.
Wow. Well, it's, you know, I've always loved astrology, and I think I started loving it when I was I was an adolescent, I guess. I started reading Linda Goodman's Love Signs. And, you know, I've always been fascinated by relationship between men and women, also by just any personality typing system. I always loved like learning about the archetype of, you know, what it means to be human and all the ways we show up. So it was, it was back in like 2002, I think. My nephew had actually gotten a reading from Daniel Giamario, who would become my teacher. And I listened to this reading. He was a newborn baby. I listened to a recording of the reading and I just felt like these lights came on. Like I was like, I know this information is so radically important. This is so essential for a parent to have this depth of knowledge around the soul journey of this child. And it just felt familiar, like I knew it already. And so years later, I was living in the Southwest, and I came to discover that I could begin studying with Daniel and with Kaylin, who helped to found the Shamanic Astrology Mystery School. And that's when I started studying. And actually, even before that, I was reading the handbook, and I did probably 100 astrology readings just from the book, just because, again, it just came so naturally. It was such a profound system to be able to support people in identifying their soul journey in a deeper way. So in the other pieces, I love shamanic astrology because it engages with the living sky. And as an individual who's been a naturalist, a wildlife biologist, an environmental writer in my previous life, um, in my current life in some ways, um, relationship with the living elements of earth and sky have always been really important to me. So this kind of added more of the sky aspect. Um, because shamanic astrology requires that you do vision questing under the sky. You have to learn the patterns of the planets. You have to know where they're at any given time, which is not always the case for astrologers.
Yeah, well, you're very good at it. I really appreciate that all you put out there, and it's so natural also. So I want to
Thank
ask you
you.
because I've read on your site, which I see all the time because I get your newsletters, which I think is a great point that I want you to speak to. You have said or written, in these intense times, it is so essential to be able to tap into the bigger perspective and locate true north in our lives. And I totally resonate with that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd like you to elaborate on that so people could really benefit by what you mean by that.
What I mean by that is that we live in a time which can of tremendous tremendous acceleration.
Mm,
So that among other things, there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of external noise that we can tap into at any given moment. If you live in a city, in some ways, if you're a sensitive soul, you feel that even more. But regardless, now we're connected, by the global web, and we sense the energies around us. But now we're very much influenced by what astrologer Barbara Hand Clow would refer to as the fourth dimension, which is where we get really all these inputs from the collective around what's true, what's not true. Um, it's just, again, a lot of noise. And so to be able to have tools to help us um, drop down into our deeper truth,
mm,
and that I think is the most essential thing. It's why I also began working with dreaming. It's
mm.
also why intuitive tools are part of what I always teach people, because if we can learn to work with our dreams, that's deep guidance from our soul. If we learn to tap into our intuition through observing signs, symbols in the world of form, and many other tools, that is self-empowerment. That's learning this subtle skill of tracking in our daily lives what's true, what's not true for us. So astrology is also part of that. It's a way of looking at the pattern of the way I've been taught to look at this, that I find helpful, is that it's the as above so below mysteries. So it's not like Saturn's making you do something. It's like the pattern of the movement of the planets in the sky is a hologram. It reflects, it mirrors what's happening in the terrestrial realm. So if you understand that pattern and how that relates to your personal life, you're aligned with that. You're aligned with the sacred patterning of creation and of sacred timing. So that helps us give true north, and it also kind of helps us to reweave that experience of profound connection, interconnected with the rest of creation, instead of it just being this individualistic kind of thing. And
Yeah.
that's so essential.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for elaborating on that because when I first started learning about astrology, it was a little overwhelming for me. Just the nodes of fate and all Chiron and this and that, and I was like, wow, But I realized that I really don't have to get it all or understand it all, and that's why I love your newsletter and all because it explains it in very clear, concise terms, and you don't have to necessarily know all the technical aspects of it, and I like it also for fun. And I
Mm-hmm.
realized from looking at it, like so much of it is just so accurate. So I encourage people just to check it out. Just even if you don't, some people I've spoke to don't vibe with it and all. Like I'm a Scorpio, so as a Scorpio, I'm a fixed sign. I'm a controller. I know everything, which of course I do, but well, even that, like the aspects I find interesting. Like when I look at the
Yeah.
science, like a lot of them, of course, not everything holds true for everybody, and it does depend on the specifics and exactly when you're born and where you're born and all that kind of stuff. But I like it. I think it's a lot of fun, and I've really referred to it on many, many, many occasions, and it's helped me to make decisions. And I'm not saying that I rely on it 110%, but I really encourage people to check it out because it really is accurate. I believe it is. It's
Mhm.
fun too. So, and it's a great way to integrate like the natural world really into your everyday life because
Mhm.
way back when the nomadic people, before we had all these technological tools, people back then realized they watched the sky, they watched the stars, they watched the
Mhm.
heavens, and they learned from the solstices and the equinoxes and the energies that were going on and the moon times and all. And it's we're talking about like tens of thousands, if not more, of information that's been gathered that is very
Yep.
accurate. So it's pretty
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And I just want to say something quickly about your Scorpio sun,
cool.
which
Hmm.
is that many people do get turned off by astrology depending on their sun sign because their whole lives they've had that projected at them. And usually it's you often first hear the very negative kind of caricature of what that sign's about, which is, a lot of it's a little bit superstitious. It's not really more of a soul-based, a full understanding of what that energy is about, and it's just the sun. So for some people, if they're really turned off by astrology, often they're a Virgo or they're a Scorpio or whatever. So they've had bad
Right.
stories told about them their whole life. So they need that curse lifted. They need
Right.
a deeper understanding of that. But
Yes.
yeah, I love what you're saying too about the cycle, like the way that there's a depth of knowledge that's been passed on, that's been accumulating, because also it's actually, there's an article that I was just reading where we, even as far back as a couple generations, um, in the Appalachians, they were telling a story about, I was reading a story about how our grandmothers, great grandmothers, grandfathers would talk about planning by the signs. The lunar signs, the lunar cycles, but also even the astrological signs. That's
Yeah.
something that has been done not that long ago.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a great benefit for people to check out for sure. Also, you mentioned about dream time and all. I encourage the guys I work with also to keep a dream journal, and for myself as well. Just if you want to speak about a little bit about lucid dreaming and
Mhm.
just the power of it, and just just real briefly, I had the guys do that for a while, and then for me, I know from my own personal experience, I've been keeping dream journals for a long time. I look back and it's like you can connect the dots, because you date it and you just
Mhm.
things
Mhm.
that may seem like absolutely absurd or bizarre or whatever, they start to make sense, and you can really put together these patterns, and it does actually relate to the celestial bodies as well. I just think it's all
Absolutely.
connected and really cool. So if you want to speak about that a bit.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So dreaming, I will say that within Robert Moss's active dreaming paradigm, it's very shamanic. It's shamanic dreaming, and we don't practice literally so much the lucid dreaming because specifically there's this idea that we're in control of so many things in our lives, right? We're trying to control everything when we're awake. And so there's a subtle difference with the way some people practice lucid dreaming, which is a way to try to control what's happening even in the dream time, and what we do, which is a bit different, and
I'm a
it is very
Scorpio. I
powerful.
love controlling
You
even
love
the.
controlling, yeah. That's awesome. Well, and I think lucid dreaming is amazing too, right? Within the traditional Robert Moss's system, there is a specific tool we use though that's called it's dream reentry, and so as well as cultivating some of the lucid dreaming skills, anyone can develop a practice of going back into that dream that you've had that still has juice and aliveness in it, because that's a place, that's a living energy, it's alive, and you can re-enter that with beloved guides, allies, guardians. You can re-enter it with a strong intent, and when you re-enter, you can bring back more information. You can potentially set the intention to have a different outcome or do something differently. And again, I think it's really interesting though, because it's kind of like this balance between the masculine and the feminine, where if it were pure on masculine energy, you're wanting to manage and control everything. Whereas there's a deeper listening. When you re enter that dream, you're also like, what's actually happening here? without me inserting my agenda, what is happening. I want to listen to that, see that, feel that more deeply. And also I do have conscious choice and will, and I get to navigate it differently. But dream reentry is extremely powerful, extremely powerful. I've had instances where I've re-entered dreams that I think could have been dreams from the future, and I really feel like I shifted the energy of that future event because of re-entering the dream. Um, it's become a practice so that also more subtle areas in my life I can kind of address just by, if I'm really afraid of something. Like yesterday I had a dream that was really pretty potent. It felt kind of apocalyptic. We all have those. So I went back into that dream and I was able to kind of feel into what that energy was about, feel it in my body, kind of enact it, move through it when I woke up in the morning and kind of dance it. And there's that idea too that if you enact the energy of that dream that might be more of a nightmare, if you can enact that, then you can move that energy and so that it doesn't have to literalize. So there's just all kinds of wisdom and insight that we can get from our dreaming. Those are just a couple things. But you're right, to keep a journal and date it, and then to add the element of what sign was the moon in, what phase was the moon, to add those aspects and begin to track, what kinds of dreams do I have when the moon is in Aries? What kind of dreams do I have when the moon is in the same place in the sky that my sun was when I was born? That you start to get into that kind of magic, and it's pure magic. It's amazing the patterns that you see and feel.
Yeah, I think it's really cool, and it's exciting stuff also. And especially when I look back, again, I've been keeping journals for years and years, and look back and those aha moments come, like, wow, okay, this really, now it makes sense. At the time it was bizarre to me, and then you just tap into to some realities that you didn't really, and realizations you didn't have before. So yeah,
Absolutely.
it's pretty cool. Yeah. So, so I wanted to talk to you. You mentioned before, well, your family. So when I get into family and your nephews and all, and the work that you've done with them, 7 sisters, or seven women and one dude.
Yes.
Let's talk about that. That's a lot of sacred feminine energy we got going on.
It's a lot. It's a big, oh my God. So, and this I just have to say, like, I was just so pleased when you reached out to me. It's like, oh, I'm being invited. I'm so honored, I just want to say, to be invited to this summit specifically and to the work that you do, because yes, I have 7 sisters. I have 1 brother, 7 sisters, and surrounded by feminine energy my whole life. And then as an adult also, I've led women's circles for the last 15 years. I've been doing Venus alchemy. Most of my clients are female. The divine feminine has been my big focus. So that's been amazing, and it's also been a bit out of balance, and so my father and my brother both have passed away. They both had cancer. And for myself, in the last 3 years, I have a pretty strong sense, based on dreams that I've had, that I could also have gotten cancer, based on some really powerful dreaming. But I've been doing a tremendous amount of healing work, and so I've had, a different outcome. But my work over the last 3 years has been a lot to do with the masculine, and the kind of the wounded masculine in my family line, and the way that I carry that forward as a woman.
Yeah, I want you to speak to that, because you've said that the women are carrying the same masculine, forget how you put it, the same masculine wound that men are. So please, elaborate on that, because this is really important stuff to get that unity for the male and the female energies back in unison.
Yeah, so I think partly, it's been amazing that you invited me to do this. It's helped me do a lot of meditating on what I wanted to share and what's kind of come through, and just ask for more clarity for that to come through. And so basically my journey 3 years ago began when I had a dream where I was in the mountains in New Mexico, and I had a dream where this stag basically appeared out of nowhere, but it was in a group of female deer. Just this stag and a group of female. And I remember in my dream, I was thinking to myself, oh, it's not really that different than the females. They're all pretty similar. And then all of a sudden, this vital life force, enormous stag, it turns towards me. It takes it suddenly, my big fat cat, I have this cat Tiger, and he takes the cat in his antlers, and he just hurls him. He kills him instantly. And then he turns towards me, and he's right next to me, and it's like he puts his antler right next to my right ovary, like right there. And in that moment, I mean, he could have killed me. He could have just eviscerated me. And I felt that energy. And in
Wow.
that moment, I said, I respect you. That's what came out of my mouth. And I woke up. And that dream has guided me for 3 years,
That's
right?
powerful.
It was like, wow, what is that? So in shamanic astrology, we see the Mars position in a woman's chart as their inner beloved, their inner masculine. It's often what we are attracted to outside of ourselves, and it's also what we need to integrate internally. And so for me, I kind of knew that Scorpio masculine is this kind of sort of this, the horned god, kind of the really primal earth masculine. So for me, the stag represents that. For
Mm.
me, that's who he is. And in that moment, though, I had this beginning of this recognition that I needed to bring the masculine more consciously into my life, because I was at the height of this work with Venus. I was working with women all the time. I was inviting the grandmothers to work with me. So this is all good, beautiful things. But there wasn't very much space held for the masculine.
Mm.
And after that time, I was actually separating from my partner at the time. I started having dreams about my grandfather, who was a pretty toxic human. He'd abused my grandmother. Um, but fast forward to last year, I had five, well, okay, so a couple months after that, well, okay, so I knew something was happening in my body as part of it. I have to make sure this story doesn't go on a million years, but I knew something was happening in my body. I knew that this being was showing me that, because dreams can do that for us. It can show us things that are happening. So a couple months later, um, I a couple months later, I went to a Robert Moss active dreaming course, and a Native woman was showing me that basically what happens is that as women in our wombs, we can take in the energy of other people into our wombs, like toxic energies. And so she was showing me that I had to see where those cords were, and I had to be able to kind of cut those cords to people that I was feeding or taking energy from. So I did some of that work. In any case, a couple months later, I started dreaming that I had tumors in my womb. And then about 2 months later, I felt them. And so then I started recognizing that, and I went to the doctor a couple months later, and I had fibroids, which is not unusual, but I could feel them growing. So this is something where my dreaming was showing me this. And in the meantime, I was getting all these other dreams and doing all this work around the wounded masculine. My brother, my relationship with my brother, there was some energy around that.
Mm.
Also with my father and with my grandfather. So um, over the course of my initiation with my own womb, with my own personal healing, I ended up needing to have a hysterectomy this last February. I did everything I could to heal, but I still had to make that choice. And but it's been, for me, I've felt it to be a rebirth in many ways. And there are other elements of that story, but what I've come to see and what I've come to feel through this whole journey is that, and I've seen this in a lot of different visions. I've seen this with a couple of the relationships I've been in with other men, where I've seen the attraction I have to the toxic masculine and what that does to my body. And I've asked the question, why have I been attracted to that? And so basically what I've come to recognize and see is that I have my ancestors, my male ancestors, who live inside of me, just like my female ancestors. And they require that I pay attention to them. They require that I also be in conversation with them. And I can tell you, it was just a few days ago that I kind of knew this, but it landed in a different way, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So that I had this kind of vision where I could actually finally see the grandfathers and begin to talk to the grandfathers. And I began to see my father and my brother. My brother passed away just 5 months ago. And I began to see them and be able to see the ways that to imagine what would it have been like if they had had an opportunity to speak of their pain, to speak of their overwhelm, to speak of everything that they were trying to carry, and yet they had no place to go to be vulnerable, to express their pain or any of those things. So I began to see how we can do ancestral healing as women inside of ourselves. But my experience is that the fibroids, I think, were directly caused by that imbalance for myself, and also the ways that I took on toxic energies from my partners, and also my attraction to elements of the toxic masculine, which is not uncommon for women. is related to the way that I had not been working with the masculine ancestors in my line. So that's a long story, but
No, it's a powerful story also, because you know, weaving all the elements of using, you know, the different realms also to help you through this. I mean, through obviously dream time and metaphor, and really looking at it and how you can heal. So on a more physical plane, like, what would you say for yourself, and what would you suggest for other women? How can they really integrate this, because there is a lot of toxicity for both men and women. So how do we integrate this healing in a way that men can relate to it and support the women, and vice versa? How can we do that? Because I think that's what's really missing out there. I think there's a big gap in the way we communicate with each other. So what would you want to say to help the men understand, to be able to support the women?
Thank you. You know, I'm going to share something I don't often. When leading up to my fibroids, I became, I had gone to Standing Rock, and then I was in a relationship for about a year with a Native American man who had a tremendous amount of pain that he was carrying. And I had visions where our ancestors, at one point, we were sitting and facing each other, and his ancestors were behind him and mine were behind me, and they were battling.
Wow.
And that energy was playing out in many, many ways. And I know for a fact that the fibroids and the way that they grew very rapidly when I was with him was related to the energies that he was carrying that I took on. And that was my responsibility and my choice to be in that relationship. And in some ways, I almost feel like I wanted that experience to abet, which is an alchemical term, to make more quickly happen what was already happening, so that I could release what I was holding in my womb, not only from my lifetime, but my grandmothers and mothers. In my view, this is controversial, but I actually think I was letting go of that. And I have an energetic womb now that's renewed.
Yeah.
What I would say to men is, I would say there was another point in this time, in this relationship, where I wanted to heal him. This is a problem women have. I wanted so badly to heal him. He met my perfect archetype. He was an activist. He was Native American. In some ways, I wanted to belong to the land in a way that I felt he could only let me belong to the land. There was a lot of shadow that I had to see in myself. But I remember there was a moment where he started drinking again. And this was not long before my surgery. And it was devastating, because when he would drink, for one thing, among other things, I know there were a lot of energy that he would attract. And for women, if you're going to be sexual with someone, you are going to bring that energy into yourself. I knew it. It was part of my initiation. But what I was shown very clearly was, I would ask, I wanted, I saw at one point, what I kept seeing in my womb when I would meditate was, there was grandmother grizzly would help me. She would try to scoop out something, and it was like these little baby snakes. It was like a nest of little black snakes, and she would put them up into the sky, but they kept coming. There was more, and there was more, and there was more. So I would ask, how can I heal this? What's happening? And she said, the problem is, you're trying to heal your partner and his ancestors. You're trying to heal all of them. You can't do that. That's for him to do. And the way that he does that is by dealing with his drinking and doing his own healing, and you cannot do that for him. And so what happens for me as a woman, I know, is my body, I'm wired to want to heal my partner with my body.
Yeah.
So as women, I think there's a lot we can do. And in fact, I'm going to be leading a online workshop to help women with this specifically.
Awesome.
Very soon, because I think it's so important. So for women, there's so many things, so many dimensions, from the foods you eat and don't eat when it comes to fibroids and the health of your womb. There is the deeper emotional work, dealing with unprocessed emotions in general. There are many ancestral healing tools we can use. And I think there's this deeper question of, are you choosing partners that you can actually create a future life with? Meaning that you're pouring your life force energy into creating something, giving birth to something with this person that's viable, or are you putting your energy into relationships that really are not going anywhere? Because a fibroid literally is all this life force energy given to something that has no future life.
Wow.
So these are some things for women to consider. I would say probably 9 times out of 10, there's a partner and there's a relationship that's involved when we're talking about fibroids, maybe
Yeah.
more often.
Wow.
So we take in the energies of the people we're with. And that's not to blame them because we're choosing them. And we've got our own energy exchange. We're doing what we do as well. For men, I would say it is so essential for you to tend to your own healing. And I want to honor and acknowledge that in this culture, it's it's hugely challenging. For women, we're given the go ahead. We're given the green light to heal. We're given so many tools, so many circles of women, so many resources. For men, you've got to seek it out, and that's why this is such a powerful thing. But to tend to your own healing of your emotions, if you don't know how to deal with your toxic rage or anger and get to the core of the grief or the sadness in that, what's going to happen is you're going to pass that on to your partner.
Yeah.
And it
And
sounds terrible to say that.
generations. Well, you're right though, and you pass it on to your kids as well. So
You
you have.
pass it on to your kids. And and also there's a space for humanness here. Like there's a messiness to loving and to being with a partner. And that's part of contracts. We do that. And
Yeah.
women, we have our own influence on our partners that can be deeply disempowering, profoundly confusing. I'm just beginning to explore what does toxic femininity look like and feel like, and see how that's, impacted men and the men in my life, because that's a whole other topic. But for men, be willing to tend to your own emotional work, because the pattern has been that women hold the emotional. It's our job to tend to the emotional field. We take that on consciously, unconsciously. If we are with male partners who are not doing their own emotional work, women will tend to take that into their bodies. So for men to become more conscious, and women also to be more able to be alone, instead of making kind of half-hearted choices about partnership where they can't fully show up. I think for women, it's for us to be very wholehearted in the way we make our choices.
Yeah, wow. Those are some really great points, Tami. So thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that from the heart. That's well,
You're welcome. Thank you.
really, it's that's important stuff. I mean, you touched on a lot of really good points there. So much of this, a lot of the people that I speak with, they don't necessarily understand or relate to the energetics of the things that you're talking about. That thoughts, energy follows our thoughts, and we do create illnesses. A lot of illnesses are
Mhm.
created, from our thoughts, our negativity, and the things that we
Yeah.
hold on to. And it's so
Yes.
important to, I'm really big about responsibility. It's really important for us to take responsibility for our own thoughts, not just
Yes.
our
Oh
words and
my God.
actions, but even our
Totally.
thoughts, because that's energy, and that creates a lot of movement, not just in the unseen world, but in the physical world as well. So
Yep.
these things are so important for us to learn how to communicate with each other, the male and the female within ourselves, as
Yes.
well as, and if we can't do that, to acknowledge the sacred feminine within ourselves as males, how are we going to have a relationship, and a unison with an actual physical woman? So these are
Right.
really important things. And I love when you were talking about the ancestors behind each other, because that's that, and especially the indigenous people of North America, they say being responsible for the next 7 generations, and I totally resonate with that. And I do feel and believe that we have the opportunity, if you want to call it karma or whatever people, understand that to be, I fully believe we can heal past, relationships. They say the sins
Yeah.
of the father, which I never liked, I never
Yes.
really understood, but I understand it now. And I'm taking that on as my own personal mission, not to carry forward, because I
Mhm.
have three boys, not to carry that
Mm.
forward the best way I
Mhm.
can and know how. And I'm hey, I'm going to make mistakes. I have made mistakes, but I'm conscious and aware and taking responsibility, being responsible, that I want with all my heart and soul to have them, give them the best opportunity they can to be as healthy and whatever they can to reach their truest, highest potential, without having all this other crap dumped on them from past stuff. So these are really
Yeah.
important things for us to look at,
Wow.
as men and women, to take
Yes.
responsibility for our own shit,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
heal through that, so we can have beautiful relationships, because that's what Creator put us here, to have a
Yes.
relationship with other people, and to co-create, and create beauty, and to be in service, right? I mean, isn't that what it's about?
Absolutely. That's what it's about, right? Oh,
Yeah.
I thank you so much for saying that about self-responsibility, because I think, on my own journey, more and more and more, as I'm coming into kind of emerging from my own initiation, that's really what it's about. It's like, how did I get into some of these circumstances in the first place?
Mm,
And a lot of it is about my patterns of thinking. So I'm
right.
finally at a place where, even though I've known it the whole time, it's just like there's another layer of self-responsibility around what's the quality of my thinking, what's the quality of my focus of attention. And I think I was raised into a culture of profound survival. My family were, poor kind of farmers on my mom's side. And there's some of that kind of really kind of oppressed, heavy energy that I
Mm,
think some of us come in with, that we've got to really actively uplift, to
yes,
choose, to become conscious of that old programming and story, and
absolutely.
bring some light in, because it can be
Yeah,
very dark and very heavy.
yeah. It's all about the light. Like, remember Al Franken used to play Stuart Smalling and be like, no stinking thinking, you know?
Right.
Yeah, it's all about the
Right.
positivity. Yeah, it's all about staying positive. Yeah,
Well, it is, and I think you may already know this. Um, it's tricky. It's a little tricky, right?
and it's
Because
challenging.
it is about, but it's positivity, and yet it's that coupled with the willingness to actually feel what we feel in the moment, and to face into and experience and feel our grief, our loss, our pain
Yes.
as well. So that is something I want to just honor, that for many of us, it's been a little confusing.
Yeah,
So part of the desire to not, or part of what I think's tripped me up around positive thinking, is I want to be authentic and I want to feel genuinely what I feel.
great point.
It's not an either or thing, it's both. And the
Right.
way they
Well,
feed each other.
men tend to do that. We stuff our feelings down, and that's a
Mhm.
great point you're making. It's so important because I always say, emotions buried alive never die. So if we're not going to feel it, and you know what, anger is not a bad thing. I mean, obviously you don't want to go out
No,
and
it can be
hurt people,
clarifying.
but health, there is a such thing as healthy anger. So, and a
Hmm.
lot of men carry, I know I do, I still do, but I find the best, healthiest way to get it out there and to communicate, with compassion, but to get it out there and not stuff it down, because that's what creates illness. That's what creates, dissension amongst relationships and all. So it's
Yeah.
the feeling part. You're right. It's men tend to think more, women tend to feel more. Is kind of the way it is, and it's really important for us to learn to feel and emote and communicate those feelings. Yeah.
Well, and this is again where we get tricky, because there's the biology, and then there's the culture, and then there's also, we live in a we live in a more masculine oriented culture, on the level that I think, I mean, there's some of us as women, I have had a hard time contacting my feelings and my emotions.
Mm,
For me, and I can look at it in my chart, I've got a Gemini moon, and whatever, that doesn't mean a lot to a lot of people, but
mm,
for me, it's actually been a lot of work to get into that place of feeling what I feel and recognizing it.
yeah.
And there's some men who actually are quite good at that from birth. But in general, I totally agree with you. But I think actually being in healthy relationship with our feelings and emotions is something a lot of women struggle with too. My biggest challenge in relationship is coming from the mind too much as well.
Mm,
And in some ways, some men can come more from the heart in that choosing of relationship, I've found.
yeah. Yeah. I don't like to make generalizations, which I do sometimes, but that's absolutely true.
It's
So it's
hard not.
really, it's finding the balance. We just really
Yeah.
find the balance between, again, there's the feminine and the masculine within each of us, and
Right.
honoring that. And I just, for me, it's the awareness is one thing. If you don't have the awareness, okay, so you need to learn to work with that. But once you have that awareness, then the responsibility comes in, and then it's doing something about it. It's taking action. It's looking at it. It's being, like you were saying, being authentic, being honest, being
Mm-hmm.
open, because we're not taught any of these things. For, like, really, you don't learn in school. You don't learn in
Right.
religious institutions. It's like, let's communicate. Let's speak our feelings. Let's it's all, there's love and there's fear. There's not a lot
Yeah.
in between that.
Right.
So, and
Yeah.
it seems like, the patriarchy's been ruling for such a long time, and it really is a paradigm of fear, especially now.
Yeah. That's
It's a
right.
paradigm of fear that does not serve anyone. So, that's why I tell the guys, it's not like we're letting the women take over the world now, but there has to be a balance. There has to be a balance
Mhm.
there that we hear, just like with the Iroquois Confederacy, which is what the U.S. democracy is based on. The women
Mhm.
were not just the life givers, but they were the holders of of the laws and the treaties, and they would take men out of power, and they would,
That's right.
make decisions of, hey, are we going to go to war? Are we going to sit in council? Are we going to, what kind of healing are we going to do here? I mean, we
Mhm.
need that again. We really need that again. And there's no reason why we can't have that now with our,
No.
in our society. Yeah.
No. Those grandmothers, those clan mothers that were of the Iroquois Confederacy, they're still alive and well, and they
Yeah.
show up in young elders that are in Congress right now.
Yeah.
They're here.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's important. And for men, you made some really good points there also. There is a lot of wounded men out there. So we need to be, it's why I came up and called it the illuminated warriors. We need to be enlightened,
Mm.
stand as warriors, not as war, but as protectors of the people, not just protectors from a physical aspect, but protectors of our spiritual being, and
Mhm.
the being, like, women and elders and children. That should be, that always was, they need to be taken care of and honored and respected.
Mhm.
And we don't see that as much as I believe that we should in today's society, and not just in this culture, but in a lot of different cultures. So that's really important stuff, is to heal those wounds, and so the men can stand up and feel
Yes.
good about themselves, and not be like, oh, am I doing this right? Or all the stuff that goes
Right.
on with men, and
Right.
would know how to support that, and vice versa. So it's, I think it's a really important time in the history of the world that we learn to communicate these things and support
Mhm.
each other. I don't see
Yes.
support with each other. I think there's a lot of miscommunication, and it's so much
Yeah.
easier to just say, and move on to the next. And it doesn't serve, it's not sustainable.
No.
It really isn't
No.
sustainable. Yeah.
I so totally agree with you around that. I love what you're saying, and that there is a lot of healing that needs to happen between the masculine and the feminine, and that's for both of us to stand up in a new way and tell a new story together.
Yeah, yeah. So I want to ask you, because you shared with me, about your nephews and all. That's what speaks so true to my heart. Again, raising, three boys, and offering like a rites of passage program to men now. There's a lot of single moms out there. There's a
Yeah.
lot of couples who are together, and not pointing fingers, but the dads just aren't present. So.
Yeah.
If you'd like to share your story about your nephews and all, what you've helped them with and what you've seen, and
Yeah. Well, I'll mostly focus. I have a nephew who's his mom is a single mom. His dad was actually deported. He's originally from Mexico, and that's a whole other issue, right? But when he was quite young, so he doesn't have a dad in his life. And also my sister, she's so busy trying to support the family, and she's very much. And one of her children also has a disability, so there's not a lot of male presence in their lives. So my nephew, when he turned 14, it was his birthday. I went to my sister's house. We were talking. I was wishing him a happy birthday, and then it just hit me. It was just like, what is he? He's coming of age. He has this. His dad was also an alcoholic. He's got all these kind of bad marks, and I mean all of these indicators that would make it so that there's so much that he's got to overcome. It's just like, how can we create some kind of coming of age ceremony to support him? And so my older sister Tracy and she works very much in a lot of indigenous communities. She lives in Mexico. We've both worked quite a bit with Native people, but we together created this coming of age ceremony for Omar. And basically what it was is we went down to the river on this friend's property, a beautiful property, and there's this area you can go to the very top of this big hill. And there's a little house at the bottom. We camped out. All of my sisters and my nieces and nephews, we were all there waiting for him. And me and my sister just brought him up to the top of the mountain, like the top of this hill, and we kind of prepared him. And then he spent the night up there. It was very simple, one night, just one night. And then when he came down the next morning, we'd made him breakfast, and the circle of us we gathered around, and we just told him all the things we loved about him and how we respected him and just how we saw him as this, powerful, potent human. So, and there were about 3 men in that circle and about 15 women, right? So these were, my niece's husband, my sister's husband. So it felt, in some ways when we were doing it, my sister Tracy and I, we were both just like, what are we doing? This is kind of awkward because we're women, we're not Native, but at the same time, it was like, this is what we can do. this is what we can offer. And, and so it felt really important. And, I'll tell you, I know there are many reasons for this, but I've seen him really flourish in these years, these last few years. And I think that it did make a difference.
Nice,
So
nice.
imperfect, for our time, but we do what we can.
Oh, it's beautiful. I think that's beautiful. And did Omar have feedback that he shared with you guys from the experience?
Yeah, I mean, he was very proud. I mean, like we took pictures of him, and at first he wasn't going to share it all, and then he started sharing with other people. He's not going to talk, hugely about it. He's pretty internal in some ways. He's very proud, but he was so embarrassed. Everybody's going around. This is the kind of thing where it was kind of awful in some ways for him because he had to be, put on the spot like this, but it was just the smile on his face afterwards, and just, he had an energy of, I don't know how to say it, but more lightness afterwards. So, some of it was weird for him, honestly. Some of it was Tracy was having him do like these little prayer ties, and he was doing some of that, but it was kind of like, where does this come from? you know?
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
It's
so
not a natural thing for somebody in today's culture, but that
it's
was
not.
it was so natural for indigenous people, not that long ago, really. And
Yeah,
I think that's part of the issue we have now, that there
yeah,
is no modern day rites of passage, so to speak. Like,
exactly.
yeah, I was bar mitzvahed at 13. Honestly, just like with my boys, even though I did what I could the best to give them that education and all, it didn't mean enough to me, really. That I didn't feel like, at 13 now, okay, now I'm a man in the Jewish tradition. Do I feel like a man? No, I don't feel like a man. So, and again, nothing against, being bar mitzvahed or any other
Yeah, you got
cultural.
something, right?
Yeah, I mean, um, today more than ever, I really feel that we
Mhm.
need to have something that's meaningful, that really resonates with the guys, that they get
Mhm.
it, and they learn that responsibility of what it is to be a man. And being a man is not puffing out your chest and kicking ass and being, forceful and taking control, and it's just not.
Yeah,
It's a lot different than what we're seeing right now, to really have the world that we all benefit from. So yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely. And I think it's amazing what you're doing because, I mean, I'm very glad that we did what we did for my nephew. And it was last minute. That's the thing. My sister and I we did a lot of meditating on it afterwards, and just like, wow, what if we would have thought about this a year ago and began preparing him? I mean, and it's not about regret because we did our
yeah,
best, but ideally, we would have been preparing him for a long time. And I
right,
look forward to a world where more of us, like with what you're creating, that becomes the norm for young men, that we
yeah,
have the tools to help them to do that, and we think about it
yeah,
in a way that works, for these young men.
yeah. Well, I thank you for doing that, and I'm sure that is an experience he will never forget. I think it's awesome, whether it was weird for him or whatever else. Sometimes, being out of your element, from shamanic practices, like non-ordinary reality, which is what you created to a degree for
Yeah.
him, is really where you can become free to be and do anything. So I honor you and your sisters for doing that. I think it's awesome, really.
Thank you.
Yeah, really great. So, and that's why,
Oh.
again, I reached out to you because I like communication and personal relationships that mean something, that I see people are making a
Hmm.
significant difference in the world, which I know that you are. So I'm really psyched that you joined this summit and all, and sharing your stories and your wisdom, and it means a lot to me. So thank you. Yeah,
Thank you so much, Waska. Just
yeah,
my pleasure.
yeah. So people out there, Tami has got a generous gift for you. So I would like you to share that with the peeps now, and let them know what you have to offer.
Okay. Yes, I am so excited because, as I briefly mentioned before, I've been kind of given this. I work a lot with the visions that I get, and they come from a lot of many different influences in my life, and a lot of deep work where they come from. But the vision that I've been given around healing the inner ancestor, the masculine ancestors, My gift is a guided meditation for your listeners to support you in beginning that process for yourself, as well as an activation kind of practice that you can use to really initiate that process internally to really encounter your male ancestors who are needing and wanting that attention, that witnessing, that healing, and to create a context for you to begin that process.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, that sounds really powerful. So I'm gonna check it out. Yeah.
Awesome.
Very cool.
All
Very
right.
cool. Yeah,
Beautiful.
that's very generous of you. Thank you, Tammy. So
You're so
you
welcome.
know, I could just talk to you for hours and hours, and maybe we'll do this again. I would love to do it again.
Yeah.
But before we go, I want to give you the opportunity to anything left unsaid, closing word, parting thoughts that you'd like to share with the audience.
Hmm. I just um, I just want to tell the young men, honor the women who are listening on their path, and to also honor the men, young men, or whatever of any age, to just say that it may feel sometimes as if your gifts, your passion, and even maybe the masculine qualities that are of the protector nature are not welcomed at this time. And what I want to say to you is that you are needed, and for you to show up and to be doing your own deeper work and to be showing up in perhaps in that way. For some men it might be that I need to take time to really heal internally, and I'm not going to be out in the world doing this big thing. I'm going to be doing this deeper work, and so do that. We need you to do that. When it's your time to be out there giving your gifts and contributing, we need that too. We need you. The women need you, the children need you. We can't do this just women, just men. We need each other. So I think that's the main thing I just want to offer is that, speaking from personal experience, I need the sacred masculine in my life, healed inside, and also in relationship. We can't do it alone.
Maho. Yeah. Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah. Well, thank you, Tammy. I just really, again, I want
Yeah.
to express my gratitude for you taking the time and joining us here today. And I look forward to co-creating something with you in the future because now that we're connected, you can't get away from me. So,
Sounds like Scorpio to me.
what else would I sound like, right?
All right, awesome.
All
So
right.
much fun. So want to honor what you're doing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it. So for all the viewers out there, I hope you got the exact what I intended for you. The beautiful Tami Brunk, who shared her heart and soul with us today. Again, my heart is happy,
Mm.
Tami. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, be sure to download the link that will accompany this to enjoy Tami's beautiful meditation. And until next time, illuminate your path with loving kindness.